Have you ever met a racist? So a few years back, I got into a debate with my cousin's husband. We're both from Oregon. We both grew up at about the same time, knew very similar types of people. He was absolutely convinced that there was all this white racism against black people, against Hispanics, against all these different groups in America. And I said, how is it that your experience is so unbelievably different than mine? I said, you grew up knowing essentially the same people at the same time. Did you ever meet a racist? Ever? And he thought about it a second. And he said, well, no, I haven't. And I said, well, then why are you so convinced that they're all out there? And he says, because, like in Indiana, Mississippi, places like that, they exist there. And I said, well, how do you know that? You don't really know that. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure. I met some people that said some things in the past from those areas. I guess he lived in like Mississippi or something for a little while. Missouri, I think he lived in Missouri. I asked him about specific instances, and he couldn't really give me any specific examples of real racism, but he was just convinced that it was out there. And I said, well, aren't you maybe just falling for the rhetoric? If your experience so strongly contradicts the rhetoric that you see on CNN and MSNBC and NPR and these places, how can you be so utterly convinced of what they're saying? I started asking other leftists this when we would talk about race and stuff. Funnily enough, almost every single time the people would say, well, no, I never met a racist myself. And the most common response is, well, I just wouldn't hang out with people like that. No, almost nobody would. That's why nobody's ever met any. This idea that, there's all these racists, it's a myth. It's a sort of like dreamed up scenario that exists somewhere else. It's always, in some other state, in some other city. The funniest incident, I actually brought this up to somebody who was from Mississippi or Alabama or one of these. I don't remember exactly where she was from. She was Jewish, actually. And I said to her, this is what I say to people when we talk about race. I always ask them this question. And she turns to me and she stops me and she says, what's really weird? I've never met a racist. And I'm from Mississippi. She's like, I'm from where all the racism happened. She's like, if I haven't experienced this, if I've never met a real racist in my life, she's like, you've got to be right. There's got to be way fewer racists than we keep thinking that there are. So when somebody says to you, racism is this awful thing in America, you can make it pretty real to them by simply asking, well, have you yourself ever met one? They will inevitably have to say no. There are some people, I'm sure some people out there have met racists. They're their uncle or something like that. But in general, most people haven't met one. So I think that does plant a seed in people's brain like, maybe I am being misled by the mainstream media. Maybe CNN is full of crap. Maybe all of these black people coming out and saying that they've experienced all this racism, maybe that's not exactly what happened. Maybe it's a misinterpretation of reality. So yeah, ask people if they've ever met a racist. This is a pretty good way of stumping anybody who is prattling on about how awful racism is in America. So that's it from me. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you want to see more, subscribe. And if you hate me, well, I'm going to get this thing removed on my face. I can always get plastic surgery. I should come up with something clever here, but I got nothing. Have a good night.
I know those things can grow out of despair in an inner city, when there's hopelessness at home, lack of work and so forth. I am eternally optimistic, and I happen to believe that we've made great progress from the days when I was young and when this country didn't even know it had a racial problem.